Donkey Kong Country. A, this is a particular iteration of the Donkey Kong franchise I've always enjoyed with three excellent platform games on Super Nintendo, as well as more recent titles by Retro Studios. The first one is going to be remastered next year in HD. The first game was one of the best-selling Super Nintendo games from late 1984 and early 1985, with its sequel the following year being one of the toughest and best games on the system. I have not heard as many high marks about the third one, but I have a soft spot for it. It's been where I definitely say that one is tougher than the first game, but easier than the second in terms of challenge. So, with the 30th anniversary of this imprint, what better way to celebrate than by looking at its most infamous incarnation? So let's talk about the CGI Donkey Kong Country cartoon and how it has more or less aged, at least in my eyes, like coconut milk. Let's get started then. This show definitely remains a source of infamy among many. A even factoring in the rather bizarre time for video game adaptations, especially the Nintendo sphere in those days, it's a curious artifact of a very different time. And they changed a lot in terms of character design with Candy and Funky getting the worst of it, arguably. And even though the games were not the most plot heavy, they were functionally collectathon titles. There's definitely not that many what's going on in their neck of the woods, which the show calls Congo Bongo, though I was under the impression that was a different game involving apes. I would say that the mocap CG is groundbreaking if it weren't for the fact that both Reboot and Beast Wars both fell into their runs by the time the show came out in both the US as well as its native country. While Beast Wars and Reboot have solid writing and acting to fall back on, even if the one state-of-the-art CG is not part of their time, this show, not so much. And I'm gonna get into why, personally, that even at the time, my state of mind was less Donkey Kong and more, I'm 6 years old, and what is this? A lot of the conflict in the show revolves around an artifact known as a crystal coconut, but for the sake of argument, I'm going to be calling it the MacGuffin crystal, since that's the purpose it serves to drive the plot, since one of the main two storylines is that King K. Rool wants to steal it because it apparently has precognitive powers. But the problem is that this show's very into King K. Rool. Honestly, he makes Plankton and Team Rocket seem like lethal assassins, and even Greg Mayles, one of the people who worked on the video games, was not a fan of the show or K. Rool's depiction in particular, with him being quoted as saying, let's just say I'm not a fan. And there's also another recurring storyline where there's a lot of get-rich-quick schemes, where DK or another resident as a ringleader. After all, they use this point of get-rich-quick schemes, and they'll get rich for this scheme, and quick. Despite how basic the plotting is, there's a whole bunch of other scenarios as well. And also a lot of characters that just one in particular, Bluster, is not from the video games. He's unique to the show. basically being like our dastardly or Snidely Whiplash character type. Maybe just me, but seeing, and even with the age of CGI, just seeing that design with a mustache, ash, and cufflinks is just, and spats is just wrong. It's just very off, is what I'm saying. Not helped by another episode where he gets a quasi Paul Williams comes from Tekken haircut to try and woo Candy to mixed results. And even when I was visiting extended family in Vancouver, Canada, not Vancouver, Washington, and seeing this, the episode which actually turned me off the show, on Teletoon. So basically, their network, and they're the ones that produced both Beast Wars and reboots. Much better shows, might add. And I tapped out over Zero to Hero. No relation to much better Son of Hercules. He's where there was serious shenanigans. Bluster thinks he's about to become an ex-ape and ends up drinking a magic elixir that mixing up with a bottle of cherry pop and goes berserk. Believe it or not, the show somehow lasted for about 2 or 3 seasons, consisting of 40 episodes, depending on which one on you source you look up. Most of the official releases I found online, as well as otherwise releases I found online, since I know a guy, I have it as 2 seasons. And this is actually the first time I watched the show the whole way through, and given how painful it was, it's also going to be the last. I mean, seriously, there's no overarching storyline, and all the conflicts mostly episodic, at which they can be neatly resolved in about half an hour's time. There's no teaser for more, which, given the results, I'm quite glad about at the end. And there also is not really much incentive to me. And the final episode is a prank war for the Crystal Coconut. So you're not missing a whole lot if you decide to tune out. All things considered, it's just a bunch of the usual stuff like whoopee cushions, cans full of spring-loaded snakes, itching powder, sneezing powder, and also each episode has a song. But given how infamous they become, I may be very grateful for the invention of the mute button. Especially there's one infamous one where DK implies he's going to there's one lyric that involves coconut cream pies that makes me wonder, please don't tell me that DK implied he was going to do something inappropriate with Candy. At least I certainly would hope not. Get your head out of the gutter, fellas. I don't really blame any of the people, be they cast or crew, for working on the show. Especially in that time frame, it's one of the situations where someone just had to go where the work is, man. As you know. And again, while Reboot and Beast was able to work with limitations to develop some pretty solid shows, like with Reboot, they couldn't make realistic humans, so they set shows inside a computer. Beast Wars, they only were able to render a few the toys ahead as the characters, so they focused on those characters, and but here they just ran right into limitations. Like, I mean, at the very least, the voice actor they hired for Cranky seems to be the most aware of what kind of show he's in, and being the crotchety, he old coot that he typically tends to be in the games, and also, though that said, I would not be against the idea of a reboot of the cartoon with better CG, writing, and voice acting, especially with Nintendo are willing to branch out more into adaptations lately, especially with how big a hit the Mario movie reboot was in 2023. He that was easily one of the first ideas I had for a spin-off, not the one I walked out of it. So I will definitely be back with other projects that are at least better than this. So in the immortal words of Cranky, go home and let me get some sleep.